Deontay Johnson has been a darling for the Radio.com Sports Fantasy Football Show and for the entire fantasy community this whole season. What did we see from him in Week 14? He got benched during the playoffs, a brutal blow. We'll look for better results in Week 15. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Radio.com Sports Fantasy Football Show, Week 15 edition. My name is Jordan Cohn, and I am joined by fellow staff writer Jesse Pantusco. As usual, we're here to bring you the best options on the waiver wire, the stream team, and stealthy starts for the next round of the fantasy football playoffs in Week 15. We'll get started with the waiver wire, where all of the following names are owned in fewer than 50% of leagues. And I'm going to get started with Lynn Bowden Jr., the running back wide receiver combo player on the Miami Dolphins. Injuries and illnesses really paved the way for Bowden to find a significant role, as Myles Gaskin, Savon Ahmed, and Matt Breida were all out for various reasons in Week 14. The snap counts from the replacement running backs were interesting. 47% for DeAndre Washington, 51% for Patrick Laird, and a whopping 71% for Bowden, who ended up with just one carry but added 7 catches for 82 yards on 9 targets. It was a strong follow-up to his Week 13 role, where he saw 4 targets for 41 yards. And with injuries in Week 14 to star receiving options Devontae Parker and Mike Gesicki, the Dolphins will need to continue to target Bowden going forward. And we should see him continue to have a large role in this offense moving forward. Jesse, who you got?
Well, not a lot of great options for us this week, but if you're willing to think outside the box a little, Broncos receiver KJ Hamler makes plenty of sense. For Hamler, one of the best athletes, not just at receiver, but at any position in this year's draft, it was only a matter of time. The second rounder is coming off his best game yet, setting a career high with 86 receiving yards in Week 14. He also tacked on a pair of touchdowns, the second and third of his career. Hamler didn't run the 40 at this year's combine, but the Broncos have reportedly clocked him in the 4.3 range, which is comparable to fellow speedsters Tyreek Hill and Henry Ruggs. Hamler was in and out of the lineup with a hamstring injury earlier this year. That's ancient history now, as he's seen the field on 73% of snaps since Week 7. He also carries some rushing upside, with Denver often employing him on jet sweeps. Hamler's volume remains a work in progress. He's seen as many as 10 targets, but only drew 3 Sunday at Carolina. However, the former Penn State Nittany Lion still has all the familiar markings of a player on the rise.
Bowden and Hamler to start off, 2 rookies. The last waiver wire option I'm going to go with, not a rookie, but not quite an established veteran. We're going to go with Nelson Agholor of the Las Vegas Raiders, Hamler's AFC West counterpart. And yes, really, we're going to look at Nelson Agholor this late in the season for the fantasy playoffs. The aforementioned injury to Devontae Parker and another injury to Deebo Samuel may have taken some wide receiver depth out of your lineup, and you may be looking for some guy to fill that void. Let that guy be the surprisingly productive Nelson Agholor. He saw 9 targets in Week 14, turning it into 100 yards and a touchdown. Those 9 targets add on to 11, 6, and 9 targets from the previous 3 weeks. That's a top 15 target share in the league, regardless of position, over the past 4 weeks. That is ridiculous, and it's crazy that Agholor is continuing to fly under the radar after consistent production as of late. Pick him up on the waiver wire this week, and maybe he can fill an important role in your team for the playoffs. Now we're going to move on to the stream team section, guys owned in 50% of leagues, again, that you can pick up and play for 1 week, maybe even more in this case. And we're going to start with quarterback. Jesse, you've got an emerging star for your pick.
Well, Eagles fans, and I'm sure Jordan and our producer Jack can both attest to this, are waking up with a little more pep in their step this morning. And that's because the Birds' 4-game losing streak is history, thanks to Jalen Hurts, who put on a clinic in his starting debut Sunday, throwing for 167 yards and a touchdown, while also scrambling for 106 yards in a win over New Orleans. The Hurts era in Philly couldn't have gotten off to a better start, with the rookie displaying the exciting dual-threat skill set that made him a second-round pick in April's draft. Hurts wasn't perfect. He coughed up a fourth-quarter fumble, but only committing 1 turnover against a Saints defense that entered Sunday with the league's 7th most takeaways is still mighty impressive. Hurts, against all odds, even found a way to make Alshon Jeffrey relevant again, finding him in the end zone for a 15-yard touchdown. Hurts' strength is obviously his rushing ability, which is why I love his matchup against the Cardinals in Week 15. Only 3 teams, the 49ers, Eagles, and Falcons, have permitted more rushing yards to opposing QBs than Arizona. If Hurts' rushing workload this week is anywhere close to the 18 carries he saw against New Orleans, you'll be glad you started him.
Jesse, you are absolutely right. I was thrilled watching Hurts yesterday. I'm really excited to see what he can do the rest of the year. I love the pick. For my stream pick, I went with the defense, and I'm going to go with the Tennessee Titans. Jalen Hurts is a good backup option. Chase Daniel, unfortunately, does not provide the same excitement. That's who the Titans are going to face off against in Week 15 when they square off with the Lions. The Titans are a disappointing unit that has by no means been an effective one this year. That's probably why they're owned in fewer than 50% of leagues and are a bottom 10 defense. But the rib injury that Matthew Stafford experienced in Week 14 could keep him out in Week 15 and beyond. I've seen was that Matthew Stafford's last game in a Lions uniform headlines and tweets all over the place. And so any matchup with a quarterback like Chase Daniel, who has been largely ineffective throughout his whole career, means there's turnover potential and a fairly low ceiling for point production by the opposing offense. Add in that Kenny Golladay still may not be ready to play, and you have a fairly limited attack going up against the Titans. The Titans could dominate this game on the ground, and with good defense, they are my streaming option for Week 15. Jesse, finish it off with the tight end.
Well, this one comes with a slight caveat because it'll probably be a few days before we know Kyle Rudolph's status for Week 15. But if Rudolph's foot injury keeps him out another game, I'd be all over Irv Smith against Chicago, a team that's allowed the fourth most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. Smith saw an expanded role in Rudolph's absence Sunday, allowing 4 catches for 63 yards and a touchdown at Tampa Bay. The 22-year-old got off to a slow start this season, but he's peaking at the right time with 3 touchdowns over his last 3 games. Now Smith faces the Bears, who have been eaten alive by tight ends this year. I'll give you a few examples. TJ Hawkinson, 7 catches for 84 yards in Week 13. Robert Tonyan, 67 yards and a touchdown in Week 12. Kyle Rudolph, 4 catches for 63 yards in Week 10. Jonnu Smith, 32 yards and a touchdown in Week 9. I'm boring everyone to tears now, but you get my point. Chicago is bad with a capital B against tight ends, and last time I checked, Irv Smith plays tight end. No need to reinvent the wheel here, just stream Smith and collect your winnings.
I like it. Irv Smith, a little bit of a changing of the guard from Kyle Rudolph. On the other side as well, it seems that Cole Kmet is really taking over that role from Jimmy Graham if you need another option. And now we're going to move on to our last segment, Stealthy Starts. These are guys who are not your typical must-start every week lineup locks. Jesse, who do you got in this all-important Week 15 Stealthy Start segment?
Well, many of you probably dropped T.Y. Hilton weeks, if not months ago, believing the 31-year-old's best days were well behind him. And who could blame you? Up until a few weeks ago, the former Pro Bowler had been a complete non-factor in fantasy. But just when we thought he was on his last breath, Hilton has come roaring back to life, enjoying a career renaissance with 17 catches for 277 yards and 4 touchdowns over his last 3 games. It took almost 3 months for Hilton to mesh with first-year Colt Phillip Rivers, but better late than never, I guess. Hilton must be licking his chops with the Texans coming to town in Week 15. The veteran has annihilated Houston throughout his career, averaging 97 yards with 11 touchdowns, his most versus any opponent in 17 games against them. Hilton posted season bests in both yards and catches when the Colts visited Houston earlier this month, and I'm expecting him to put another robust effort forth in Week 15.
I like the pick, going with the red-hot Hilton, an established veteran. I'm going to go with a rookie wide receiver for my Stealthy Start recommendation this week, Brandon Aiyuk against the Dallas Cowboys. And again, this one may not seem so stealthy, but he is not only a stealthy start, but a must-start receiver in Week 15, seeing as the injury to Deebo Samuel may be a severe one that holds him out the rest of the year. Putting your trust in a rookie in the fantasy playoffs may be tough. It's not always a sure thing, but we all know how bad the Cowboys' defense has been the entire season, both on the run and through the air, and Aiyuk should have no trouble finding room to run after the catch this week. His role has increased throughout the season, and the last 4 contests he's played in, he has seen 10, 14, 9, and most recently a whopping 16 targets in Week 14, which he turned into 10 catches and over 100 yards. Start him with certainty in all formats. He's one of my favorite options for DFS this week as well. I really like what Aiyuk can provide in Week 15. Jesse, you have another rookie for our final recommendation.
I know, again with the rookies. Fantasy players have been avoiding the Rams' backfield all year, and for good reason. Until recently, the carry distribution between Cam Akers, Darrell Henderson, and Malcolm Brown have been almost impossible to predict. But the last 2 weeks have finally provided some clarity with Akers, the 4th running back selected in this year's draft, emerging as LA's unquestioned workhorse. Akers has been a busy bee lately, handling an exhausting 53 touches in wins over Arizona and New England the past 2 weeks. He seems to have distanced himself from both Henderson and Brown, who have combined for just 11 touches during that span. Akers 171 rushing yards in week 14, accomplished on a career-high 29 carries, or the most by a rookie this season. If you're worried about fatigue being a factor, don't be. Akers played on Thursday night, giving him a longer than usual recovery time heading into week 15. As double-digit home favorites against the winless Jets, I don't see any reason why Akers can't push for another 20-plus touches in the fantasy semifinals.
There you have it. Thank you for tuning in to the Week 15 episode of the Radio.com Sports Fantasy Football Show. Please remember to like and subscribe. If you have a question, drop it in the comments. We will be happy to answer it and help you out to fuel your playoff run. Best of luck in Week 15 of the fantasy football season.